So with the current dating apps and dating trends, my next guests say modern dating can actually be quite dysfunctional, but that shouldn't lead to despair. Hosts of the It's Just Dinner podcast say there are things parents can do to help their kids navigate modern dating in a healthy way. Bob Walz and Dr. Tom Robinson join me, and I have to say, can I put my cards on the table?
Sure.
This is such a treat for me because both of these gentlemen are former professors of mine, so I'm doing my very best today to make you proud. I am. Bob in particular has been a dear friend and mentor for many years, and Dr. Robinson, it's great to see you again
nice
as
to see
well.
you.
Great to be here.
All right, you two, so what set you down the path of a podcast about dating?
Well, I think it goes back to our students, and years ago we were talking to our students, asking them who they're dating and what's going on in their lives, and they would look at us and go, we're not dating anyone. And it just caught us by surprise and shock.
It was a shock because it wasn't that way. When we were students there or previous, it was kind of a new thing that we had a lot of young men who were staying home on Friday and Saturday night playing video games, and a lot of young women who were sitting home because no one was asking them out.
So Bob, what makes dating dysfunctional then?
Well, there's kind of two things. One is the technology, because now it's easier to be mean. Before, if you were mean to a date, it would get around your high school or it would get around, your church or whatever. And now because you're anonymous, it's easy to be, ghost people or to not be friendly. And the other thing is kind of culturally, we've kind of steered people away from dating in their teenage years. And that's kind of impacted them where they're a little dysfunctional now on relationship development.
Like we say, just be friends, and promote those healthy.
Or just group date.
Go on a group date.
Group date.
Don't single date. And so in the LDS culture, don't single date until after your mission. And so you go through your teenage years never, having a conversation with a girl, and then you go on your mission and you don't associate with women, and then they tell you go find a wife. And so it's a very difficult thing to do where they're good intending and they're good people, and and missionary service is important, but it's really hard to go from not knowing how to talk to a woman to asking one to marry you.
Right.
And so that's a little scary for, it is.
Any other changes you observed, Dr. Robinson, that kind of lead to this dysfunction that we've described?
Well, I think it's the staying home.
Yeah.
And opting to stay home as opposed to going out with someone.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is the boys aren't asking the girls out, the girls are sitting home alone. And now what happens is this deep hole of despair, depression. We've seen depression grow quite rapidly. They're not congregating together. They're not talking.
We know loneliness is an epidemic.
It's an epidemic.
That's a sobering and sad fact.
Not only in the United States, but internationally,
it's a
dating
problem.
has become
and there's so much pressure on marriage that everybody has lost this idea of dating, and they can't figure out how to do it anymore.
Yeah. These are the kind of conversations and topics that you take on the podcast, and I love the name of it. It's Just Dinner. It's just dinner.
It's just dinner.
It's just dinner. That's the solution to the problem.
It's just dinner. We've asked you to also pinpoint today things parents might be able to do, knowing a lot of moms and grandmas are watching this program to help turn around that dysfunctional scene that we described. First, you say we can encourage our sons and daughters to date frequently.
Please. Please let them date. Because that's one of the biggest problems that we've identified is that when you don't date from 16 plus, when you're not dating, you don't learn the skills. You don't have the ability. Then when you get into college and your parents send you off to college and think everything's going to be great now, you're older, you have lots of experiences, you're going to date all the time, and they haven't developed the skills, and so then they don't date, and they sit home alone.
You talked about that emphasis on marriage, and that leads to your next piece of advice, which is don't just push marriage, push relationships.
Right. Well, there's so much pressure on a first date often because if you're looking at this as a function towards marriage, a first date is an invitation to be married. And so they come back with a roommate, say, well, how did it go? The parents call you, well, how did it go? You've been on one date, and there's this pressure, and the pressure is what needs to be removed. So parents a lot of times put that pressure on their young adult children by saying, are you dating? How did it go? They call you up. We do bad date stories, and one of them, they went on the date, and the parents were at the restaurant, observing
watching the dinner.
And so sometimes, the helicopter parenting can be too much in the dating because you have to develop compatibility before you can have commitment in a relationship.
Right.
And until you've gone out with someone and got to know them yet, you don't know if you're compatible to move on to a relationship.
Yeah.
And so first dates need to be less pressure.
I agree with that, and I think it's so interesting. Someone once described, I'm remembering in the throes of my single years, which stretched on way too long, but someone once described it as dating is a numbers game, which is and that speaks to the pressure. Like the more dates you go on, the less pressureful it feels, right? Then you can have fun and really focus on the
we
person.
encourage the kids to go on a lot of dinner dates to meet a lot of people.
It's just
because you won't have an opportunity to see what you like and what you don't like. You'll miss out on a lot of experiences if you're just dating one person and then immediately want to get into a relationship with that person.
Good words. You've got about a minute left together. Your final piece of advice for parents watching is to model healthy relationships yourself.
Right. To develop, to show your children that people learn much more from observing their parents than from what their parents tell them.
Yeah.
And if their parents are good at relationship development, meaning they have friends, they have conversations, they discuss things, and they model good relationships both in and outside of their marriage, their children identify with that and they understand how to connect with people. And so simple things that we like, making eye contact and knowing what to say and asking about them and being kind, are all things that we learn from observing our parents in those situations.
And also taking the opportunity to teach your children those things.
Right.
To teach them how to talk.
To say the words.
Yeah, to say the words and to be involved in a conversation and be involved with other people.
That's one thing I picked up with the younger generation as well, is just we have to be a little more literal in how we teach, right? A little more direct in what we say and deliver it and how we approach it.
Very
well,
much.
You both have a really interesting lens toward this with your role and mentorship of students over the years. So I'm excited to listen to the podcast.
Good.
How can we?
Good.
We're on all the major podcasting networks, Apple, Google, Spotify.
Okay.
And you just go to the It's Just Dinner podcast, and we have lots of fun. We try to be funny.
I feel that.
We have some amazing guests. You wouldn't believe the list of guests we have. So it's a lot of fun.
Okay, I'll be tuning in. Great to see both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.